Obsession. A true story. The unfolding of a very complex process of obsession, with its main roots planted deep in the mysterious soil of past incarnations, with many implications projected into the future of those involved.
Dear friends, we are happy to be here once again with you to nourish our souls with lessons that you and I are going to take to immortality. It's wonderful to have the opportunity to study the book Obsession together, because we are reminded even during our physical and temporary experience that there is a greater world, the real world, the spiritual realm, which interacts with us on a daily basis, and as Kardec has demonstrated already in the Spirit's book, on a constant basis, whether we are aware of it or not. So we are very grateful to the Spirit Manuel Filomeno de Miranda and the loving spirit of Dr. Bezerra de Menezes for bringing us this renewed awareness that we are in constant interaction with the spirit friends who are already free from the physical body. As a matter of fact, they are in much greater number than we who live in the physical body are. So in reality, we live in the world of the spirits who are already free from the physical experience. So in this new chapter, chapter 4, entitled Ruthless, Cruelty, we see in very much detail how a spirit that is connected to the Santa Maria family from the present and previous incarnation influences their daughter Esther. And throughout the chapter, here are questions that we can take into consideration. How is it possible that a spirit entity influences someone who is incarnated so closely and so intensively? Is there divine justice behind it? Where is God in the midst of such strong process of spiritual influence? How do we find God in the midst of such a relationship with the spiritual realm that in this case in particular seems to be very negative? How do we find God's love in the midst of such apparent and endless negativity? And speaking of finding God, as we meditate about these questions, which are very important to all of us, we would like to ask Mark to open our study of tonight by saying a prayer from his heart to all of our hearts.
Dear God, thank you for the blessed gift of this time to reflect upon our lives and our connections with the spirit realm. As we begin this journey of understanding and self-awareness, may we pray now for all those who are influenced by the spiritual world in a way which may be keeping them from being able to live their life and being able to be connected emotionally and physically to others. May we bless them right now and bless those spirits who are connected to them, helping both those spirits and those who are obsessed by them with the recognition that they are children of God and that there is divine mercy behind all events and all actions. May right now we thank God for His continued love and His continued presence in our lives. And let's now bless all those who are under obsession with the love that they deserve, and guide them towards understanding the beautiful power of God's love. And so be it.
Let us now enjoy the reading of chapter 4.
Chapter 4. Ruthless Cruelty. When the spirit possessor is a wicked one, things are different. He does not take the body of the incarnate person gradually. He takes it over violently if the person does not possess enough moral strength to resist him. The spirit does so, led by a deliberate wickedness to torture and torment his victim in every possible way, even to the point of trying to kill him by choking him or throwing him into an open fire or into dangerous places. Controlling the organs and limbs of the unfortunate person, he blasphemes, affronts, and abuses around. He performs eccentricities and acts with every symptom of full madness. Genesis chapter 14, item 48. Many months went by without the least sign that Esther would recover sanity. Her light blue eyes, formerly bright and alive, now flashed a wild look. Her face was ashen and lifeless, lacking the frame of her beautiful hair, which had been given a crew cut. She was a living ghost, driven by a vicious and unknown will. Madness was her usual condition now. The employees hired by the hospital to care for the patients acted as if they were there to fight wild beasts, not to help human beings like themselves. Consequently, they usually acted like animals themselves, beating the more violent patients savagely. Left to the whims of such unscrupulous servants, Esther suffered mistreatment of all kinds. Since she often became very aggressive, they beat her cruelly, meaning to calm her down. This only aggravated her physical condition. Dark spots all over her body and a few broken teeth bore witness to the ruthless treatment she was being given. The doctors had pronounced her incurable. As such, and also because she was particularly troublesome, they neglected her deliberately. No visits from her family were allowed in view of the impossibility of a normal dialogue. Strangely enough, her condition seemed to be exacerbated by any conversation, especially when reference was made to her father. In many similar hospitals, professional and human dignity have long been forgotten. Whenever ethics are absent, love, compassion, duty, and charity are likewise ignored. Patients are kept there only for the income they bring in. When some of them are released, apparently calm because half subdued by drugs, it is known that they will soon come back, hopelessly chained to a vicious cycle, in and out and in. Families are exploited, spending their money for virtually nothing, since there is little to no preoccupation on the part of the hospital board to strive for positive results. But those who profit from such commercialization of the health and life of their fellow men will return to the earth plane one day to pay for their heartless greed. And frequently they will come to the very same place where they once indifferently watched others suffer. Love, however, is the essential component of any therapy, and of vital importance in any circumstance. It often succeeds where drugs fail because it helps to reveal the invisible causes and consequences involved. Absorbed by materialism, the scientist rarely looks for divine inspiration when dealing with a difficult case. Words like God, prayer, and such are never found in medical textbooks. But divine love sees to everything. When the shadows seem to get darker and hope, like a flickering candle, is slowly waning, a beam of the divine light shows a new way. This happened to Esther when a young assistant nurse came to work at the hospital. Rosangela, her name was. On her first routine rounds of the hospital wards, she saw Esther in a straitjacket, delirious as usual. The good nurse was immediately attracted to the young patient and mentally listed her as one needing special attention. She had heard of a new drug called Serpicil, extracted from an Indian herb, the Rhofolia serpentine. It was being used as a tranquilizer with excellent results. Rosangela had been greatly interested in the discussion of the drug's effects.
Everything considered, she saw Esther as a possible patient on whom to try the new medicine. Meanwhile, poor Esther, lost in herself, wandered aimlessly through the long, dark alleys of madness, a prisoner of untold agonies. By then she had lost total control of her mind, which began to show the first signs of imbalance as a consequence of the prolonged influence of the unwholesome fluids issued by the evil spirit that subjugated her. Esther herself could not understand what her trouble had been that evening. She had felt an extreme anguish followed by a cold sweat and the sensation of having been thrown down over a cliff, and then she kept falling endlessly, never reaching the bottom. She felt as if her heart had been displaced and was beating irregularly. Her body ached down to every little cell, and her head felt as if in the center of a whirl, spinning constantly, making her unable to coordinate her ideas. If she cried for help, her vocal cords would not obey her command. Instead, shocking, foul words came out of her mouth against her will. In her confusion, she sometimes heard her own voice at a distance, as if separated from herself. It sounded strangely different. She experienced a hate she did not feel. She cried desperately, but her tears seemed to evaporate from her dilated pupils. She was constantly feverish, shaking all over in fits of madness. She had once seen herself clearly out of her body. From such a position, she had been able to watch it convulsing uncontrollably. In that confusing state, feeling like a double, she had not noticed her guests, greatly shocked at the sight of her strange transformation at her coming-out party. From that awful moment on, she could remember nothing else except the continuous struggle against the giant who dominated her. In fact, through the influence of the obsessing entity, Esther's astral body had been forced out of her earth body, although she kept herself connected to it through the silver cord. Such an unusual position confused and disturbed her greatly. Sometimes she would see her frightening and furious obsessor grimacing insanely. Whenever he started beating her, she tried to get back into her physical body, like someone struggling to wake out of a nightmare. Prevented from it by the entity, the agony was then renewed. Ideas alien to her thinking found their way into her mind and settled there arbitrarily. Blocked by this strange invasion, her own thoughts were suppressed. Her feelings and emotions were tossed and torn while the weird battle raged in her inner self. A frightful growing terror possessed her, and she saw no way to escape, no positive help coming. When submitted to electric shock treatment, one could imagine the convulsive agony, her body writhing in pain, her mind fading into unconsciousness. When it was over and she returned to the warmness of the physical body, she would face her tormentor again, loathsome and demanding. Frightened, she would then flee from her body, surrendering it again to the obsessor's command. As she grew physically weaker, she fell into a state of successive faints, which expelled her spirit form from her physical body. Such a condition left her in a somewhat constant astral projection. From this position, she saw her obsessor face to face. He would then threaten her coarsely and drag her to places where dwelt hideous, inferior spirit forms. In those low astral regions, no light shone, and a suffocating miasma filled the air. It was a place that looked like a gruesome cemetery with open tombs scattered about. There, living dead human forms moved about. Some tried desperately to reanimate their dead bodies. Others wailed for their lost physical forms. Some, in terror, fought horrible animal-like forms which wanted to get a hold of their decaying flesh. Others still moaned and whimpered, all forming an endless mournful procession. Was it hell, she wondered? Ashamed of the sickening sight, Esther would either lose consciousness or tune in with the environment and become as wild and delirious as those around her. Later she wakened to find herself back in her battered physical body. Then she would have a short pause in merciful oblivion, and the struggle would begin anew, around and inside her flagging soul. Sometimes she asked herself what had happened to her loving parents who had not come to rescue her. In vain she cried to exhaustion, but mocking laughter and obscene aggression from grotesque and deformed faces around her were the only answers. Once she tried to pray, but in the whirling mist of her inner confusion, she could not coordinate her thoughts. At times her mind wandered back to what seemed now distant memories of family, teachers, and friends who had once loved her. "You're dead, or almost," said the obsessor. "Soon I will take my revenge. I'll crush the life out of you to punish your father. You shall die as I have died, so that he may also die. I'm just waiting for him." "My God," she exclaimed, "I must be delirious. I'm young. I want to live. Sweet Virgin Mary, set me free. They make me mad. I'm innocent. And still, here I am, suffering in the depths of hell." "Sure, you're innocent," he continued, "at least as far as I'm personally concerned. But I hate you because I hate your father. I have to destroy you, so I must destroy him. I'll dominate you so I can submit him." "Who are you?" she asked. "Are you a destructive demon? Have pity on me. I'm only a child." "I'm the demon of justice, not the angel of compassion," he retorted scornfully. "Let's stop the silly talk, and let's fight again." Applauses were heard from an invisible audience, and tumult was on again, and the battle also. Fierce, dreadful, ruthless. And yet she was innocent, but only in her present incarnation. As an eternal spirit individuality, she had her debts to the law, and because of them, the indebted incarnate spirit, now carrying the physical form of a young girl, again experienced racking moral pain. Esther's parents had given her a careful education. They had guided her and helped her grow into a beauty, but they had forgotten to prepare her for spiritual realities. Roman Catholicism, in which she had been constructed, encumbered by many rules and extravagant rituals, has long gone astray from true Christianity, thus becoming incapable of helping to develop the spirit gifts latent in every human being. Revelation has been banished from its tenets. The clergy think themselves empowered to grant heavens or give out chunks of paradise by the mere uttering of meaningless words and the performance of useless rituals. Nowadays, many parents develop a curiously complacent attitude. They consider that no reference to an afterlife should be made to their children, assuming that they are still too young for such elevating ideals. But on the other hand, they concede that the wild expressions of a stormy manhood or a carefree womanhood should be stimulated, considering it as proper to the growing process. Those emotions, however, without the control of a balanced personality, are very poor substitutes for love, and are very likely to be transformed into outlets for primitive sex impulses. Because modern parents tend to consider their children as too young to confront the perennial message of surviving spirituality, they do not prepare them for a dignified maturity and a happy old age.
What incredibly enriching chapter for the soul, dear friends. We are grateful to the spirit of Manuel Filomeno de Miranda for showing us that those whom we call obsessors are but spirits who are undergoing learning experiences just like us. They, as we have seen throughout the chapter, are experiencing great pain, and the reason why they turn to the venues or avenues of obsession is because they don't know how to deal with that pain in any other way. So before we point fingers, before we accuse, before we see Esther or ourselves as victims, let us meditate upon the fact that the spirits are deserving of our understanding, of our mercifulness, of our compassion, because they are only acting in such a manner because they don't know what we know. They don't know that the possibility of forgiveness is possible. They don't know that by freeing others, they free themselves. They don't recognize yet, dear friends, that they are beautiful children of God and that our very Master, Christ Jesus, is waiting for them with open arms. They don't see themselves as deserving of divine love and divine mercy and divine compassion. So let us, throughout our reflection of this chapter, send them mentally together as a universal family, vibrations of love and gratitude. And let us always remind our spirit friends, whom we label sometimes as obsessors, that they too are children of God. And if we have hurt them in the past, it's because, like Esther and like the Santa Marias, we didn't know what we were doing. We were ignorant of the spiritual truths. Therefore, we acted as blind spirits. And the blind can only lead the blind, which leads to even more blindness. So now that we were given the light of the Spiritist understanding, let us extend this beautiful, never-ending light to the friends who accompany us and watch us on from the spiritual realm. Let us think of them with kindness, with love, with understanding, with a feeling of brotherhood and sisterhood, extending to them the universal family feeling and reality that we wish for ourselves. As we have learned through the words of the Spirit Manuel Filomeno de Miranda, nothing happens by chance. Do you remember, dear friends, in the beginning of this study tonight, when we asked, where is divine justice in all of this? And where's divine love? These are questions that Esther herself has asked. And the answer is very simple. Divine justice and divine love walk hand in hand together. There is no justice without love, and there is no love without merciful justice. So where is it? It is in a previous existence. We learn that though Esther is young and innocent in this lifetime, as an immortal individuality, she had depths that her consciousness, not God, asked her to respond to. So the whole process of obsession that she is undergoing, her connection to this spirit, is not a punishment, but rather an opportunity for Esther, as an immortal soul like each and every one of us, to take responsibility, to respond for her actions. And so this is a blessing from God, and this is where divine justice walks hand in hand in symbiosis with divine love, because God trusts our divine nature so much that He in His kindness allows for us to have many opportunities to respond to our own consciousness. Could we respond differently? Yes, we could. But at times, pain is necessary to awaken us to the reality that we are not here on the earth on holiday to have fun or to cultivate material wellness. We are here first and foremost to awaken ourselves to our own spiritual realities and journeys as immortal souls. So the pain here, dear friends, is being used as an awakening mechanism because, as the Spirit Manuel Filomeno de Miranda points out, our dear Esther did not receive any education from a spiritual nature. She learned how to follow rituals. She learned how to automatically connect to God without much feeling. So she now is learning to go deeper. Pain is awakening her to develop a deeper connection with God. We are not at all criticizing any other forms of Christian practice. Christian practice is valid in whatever form it takes shape. what we are saying is, as we practice connecting to God, do we have the courage to connect not only automatically, but also consciously through the heart and through the mind? Are we able to do that? This is why our dear Esther is experiencing this pain from an immortal perspective. God is trusting her with this pain in order to awaken her to a deeper understanding of her divine nature.
Yes, and I also think there's, just to add on to what Carol's saying, I also think this chapter teaches us something important about parenting, and specifically about the fact that a lot of parents, as the Spirit author says, a lot of parents neglect the spiritual nature of their children, the immortal spirit that lies within, and they may be afraid, as the Spirit author talks about there, to talk about the afterlife, to talk about the immortal nature of their lives. And the Spirit author is making, in no uncertain terms, that's a big mistake. We need to prepare our children for the strength of their moral life. We need to prepare them for the fact that they're immortal spirits. We need to think about the fact that they are in this world for a reason, that they're here for the opportunities that God has given them to develop an understanding of themselves as compassionate, loving people who are desiring not just material things, in fact, far from it, instead desiring to love and to serve. And so here we see really the importance of that you can have the best education in the world. You can be living on the country club, so to speak, having the jet set life, as they used to say, going from town to town, city to city, continent to continent every weekend. But if you don't have that spiritual education, you might wake up in pain one day. So divine justice will at some point arrive. Maybe not early in your life, maybe later in your life. But in this particular case, what's so important to realize is that in a way we can think about Esther's pain right now as a blessing, because it's helping, potentially, we'll see as we go on through the book, as Esther and her family begin to wake to these bigger realities of life. So with that being said, Carol, would you like to add anything else to our discussion?
As we undergo new phases in our lives, especially as young adults, as we make decisions that will shape our present and future, let us remember that God is available to us and that we are entitled as children of God to cherish this loving connection. This loving connection, as the Spirit author points out to us, is latent in all of us. None of us is deprived from this one and only unique connection, as we are heirs of our divine Father and Mother God. So let us remember, as we awaken each day, to cherish this connection, because the idea that we should grow into a carefree type of womanhood, or in a stormy manhood where we do whatever we want, however we want, whenever we want, is likely to bring us to very challenging situations where we act likewise our animal companions. As the Spirit author points out, we end up finding only primitive outlets for our impulses, including our sexual impulses. And our sexual impulses, dear friends, are a gift from the Creator. They are creative sources of force that allow us to materialize our most beautiful inspirations on this earth. So let us cherish this energy within us in a divine, loving, respectful, and dignified way by going beyond the impulses that are animal-like, and by remembering that this too is a tool of divine manifestation on the earth. So before we attune ourselves with the carefree expressions of womanhood and manhood, let us remind ourselves that we are immortal spirits in nature, and that we are entitled to act with dignity, with respect, with compassion and love for ourselves and for others.
Yes, that point you're making about sexual impulses being, in a way, in service of love and service towards others is so important to realize. And I think that is actually probably one of the biggest messages that we can learn from this book about the responsibility that all of us have once we go into puberty, once we develop those sexual impulses, is to use them for the service of the good, for love, for connecting us to higher spirituality, and not just using that as something that connects us only to lower passions and so forth.
We are here to not give in to the lower passions, as Mark is saying, but rather to literally place mind or spirit over matter. This is what the school of life is for. And because Esther was not given this type of awareness, the gift of this type of education, she is now in great pain.
Yeah, and she wasn't even someone who we might imagine, she committed a lot of sexual sins. In fact, she's described in the book as being innocent. And yet that's still dangerous. So in a way, we need to realize that it's important to educate ourselves. It's important to be aware of this, right? Even if we're not separated from the lessons to learn here, right?
Right, and we are responsible for making use of all the talents God has given to us in a conscious, responsible, and dignifying way. So please, dear friends, let us respect our spiritual and physical gifts by thinking carefully about how each and every one of us are putting them to use, reminding ourselves that we are love, we are light, and we are joy of living. Let us end our study tonight by giving graces to God for the gift of our physical and spiritual bodies, for the gift of this beautiful reincarnation, for the gift of all the talents God has placed within the realms of our hearts, for the gift of all of our sentiments and impulses, for the gift of learning how to find within our impulses and sentiments, thoughts and feelings, the divine nature within. And let us practice for this week, constantly reminding ourselves that we are beautiful children of God, immortal spirits that were born on this earth again and again to learn, to love, and to serve. So be it. And until we meet again, we wish you many beautiful, loving blessings.